Okay, sorry. Sorry, Grace. Anyway, you will need to analyze the arguments and present it and identify logical weaknesses. So let's say, for example, somebody comes to you, wants to teach you about a Jehovah's Witness. Okay, well, what makes Jehovah's Witness any better or worse than Christianity? Is it the same? How would you know? You need to be able to know what is good evidence. We need to know what is a good logical argument and what's bad arguments. Because when we are presenting Christianity to other people, we need to be able to know whether our arguments are weak or strong, or our sources are weak or strong. We also want to be able to find, of all the different views that are being presented, being able to identify the best view based on logically supported evidence. Now, we often think that just because we quote the Bible, and that's good enough evidence to support it. But are we including the Bible properly? Are we using the interpretation of the Bible correctly when we're supporting our own arguments or our own ideas? The aim is to help invest more in developing rational, evidence-based approach for evaluating opposing ideas. In other words, we're not right because we have the Bible. We're right because we have the evidence and the logical arguments that supports the idea of truth. Because truth cannot contradict itself. It cannot argue for one thing and then argue against that same thing. That's false idea. That's a false statement. All truth has to be consistent. It has to be consistent with itself. It has to be consistent with reality. And it has to be able to explain what it claims to explain. So that's something that you need to develop too, because we can't in this course get into the fine details of this. This is something that you need to discover. You need to read up on different things about logic. And that's basically what I'm saying there in the green is it's very highly valuable for you to study logic and the fallacies independently. You could go to, for example, Wikipedia and look at the list of logical fallacies and start to learn more about how people make errors in their logic. And then be able to look at your paper and say, am I making these same errors when I put somebody down? That would be ad hominem, that's attacking the person. That's not a good argument for avoiding or discrediting a person. No, we look at the argument, not the person's character. You could say, for example, recently Ravi Zacharias has been exposed as a sexual predator. We could say, oh, I'm going to avoid all of his material because of this image. But you can basically say, look at his argument and not the person. And be able to say, okay, these are good arguments, even though the person was sinful. Right? So that's an example of being able to figure out what's logical and what's reasonable and what kind of errors we might make. Here are some suggested sources. One of them I've already supplied to you, which is the Simon Schuster Handbook of Redders. There's a section halfway through the book that talks about some of these logical problems or how to make deduction or inductive reasoning. Peter Kreeft is a Christian who writes on logic. So that's also a very good book to pick up on because he starts off with the basics and gets into more detail than the Simon Schuster book. Okay, so basically all assignments, we don't want plagiarism either. Plagiarism is basically copying and pasting information from sources we use not putting quotes around them, or maybe putting quotes around it but not referencing where it came from. We have to do all three. We've got to quote them, we've got to put quotation marks around them, we've got to tell the reader where it's coming from. We don't want to forget to do that, because even if we forget to do that, it makes us look bad. So as long as you are putting quotes around something and putting a reference saying, I got it from this author and from this book or journal, it saves you from this crime of plagiarism. If you forget to do that, it looks bad, okay? So maybe you're running out of time, your assignment's due, you don't know how to paraphrase something. It's better that you put direct quotes in and then give it to the professor, rather than thinking, oh, he'll not want me using so many quotes, and then forgetting or intentionally leaving out the quotes. This actually goes for both words and also ideas. So let's say, for example, your paper argument follows very closely to the arguments from other sources, but you don't use that source that you read in your paper. That would be plagiarism if you're copying the argument ideas, even though it's not exact words. So it could be a copy of words, it could be a copy of ideas. It's like saying, oh, I like the way you wrote your paper. I'm going to use your ideas in my paper. Okay, that would be plagiarism. You're copying from another student. So we want to avoid it. It's okay to look at, examples of how other people follow certain things, but it's important to avoid copying somebody else's ideas and structuring them in our paper. And we have to do that through paraphrasing, summary, and also referencing where we're getting the information from. And also our final draft. It's okay to make mistakes when you're working through your first, second, third, or 10th or 11th draft. But when you finally submit in the draft and there's plagiarism still on it, that's a problem, okay? So make sure that you're aware when you're taking material from a source, put those quotes around it and cite where you're getting it from immediately, so you don't get distracted and then forget about those quotations and reference. Because it could be intentional, it could be unintentional. Okay. And finally, what you would do is, for those assignments, you're sending it to my email. And I would want it in a Word document form. I don't know whether Google Docs could be workable, but you could try it. And this is my email. Are you missing the point? The phrase missing the point means, are you not understanding the idea? And it's actually based on a book by Tony Campolo, in which they talked about adventures of missing the point. So, okay, so let me go back here. This writing format. Okay, I want to go back a little ways. I want to show you one way of learning something from a source. Oh, where are you? Okay, I want you to take a look at the phrasing of the question. What should you have done? What type of verb tense is being used there?
Is it past perfect?
It is present perfect.
Oh, sorry, present.
What does present perfect mean? When do you use present perfect?
It happened before, and continuing to now present.
Okay, that's one way of using it. That's started in the past and it's up to the present, okay? There's two other ways of using the present perfect. Don't know what other ways. There's two other reasons for using present perfect. Why is it different from simple past?
Maybe I guess to emphasize. Emphasize sentence or question. Yes.
Yeah, not necessarily to emphasize. Okay, simple present you use, or simple past you use it, why? Why do you use simple past?
To talk about a completed action.
A completed action. A single, one, completed action, okay? You can use present perfect for multiple times occurrence in the past. So more than one time. So that's the difference between simple past, which is one time, and present perfect, which could mean multiple times. Third thing, it could be something that happened in the past that was related to now. In other words, somebody asked you, oh, you want to have lunch with me? And you could say, I'm sorry, I have already eaten. Okay, so you ate in the past, but it's related to something in the past. It wasn't something that continued, it's just something that happened here is related to the present moment. Okay. And compare this question to this question. What should you do? What verb tense is that? And why are they using it?
Present simple.
Yeah. Present simple. Why are they using present simple instead of should have done?
Maybe the task has not yet happened.
I'm sorry?
Maybe the task has not yet happened. And
I'm having a hard time hearing from the mouth.
so maybe we're using the present simple because the task has not yet happened. But when we use the done, it means that something happened that can be done in the future as well.
Okay. So you're saying that this happened in the past?
No, it has not yet happened.
It has not yet happened. Okay. So it's a future event.
Yes.
Okay. Present or future event. Okay, good. What I want to point out here is the difference when you are maybe writing a book report or journal or movie report. You can use a present perfect to talk about what the writer should have done. Okay, so for example, maybe you're reading something that's a very difficult article or a book. You can critically say the writer should have been much more clearer. He should have used simpler language. He should not have done this. So you could use this for published books, something that's already been put into print. Whereas a comment like this means it's not yet published. It's still being reviewed. It's still being proofread and edited. So if, for example, in comments that I make, I'm going to tell you, you should do this, you should change this, replace that. I'm using simple present because we have not yet got the final draft. Whereas if you are dealing with a source that has already been published, it's out there in the public, and you cannot change it anymore, then you can use a present perfect to talk about something that was in the past that should have been corrected or changed. Okay? Maybe you could say, oh, it was well organized, but it was aimed for the wrong audience. He should have made it for lay people, or it should have been more focused on the language, being critical of the language, or he should have used these other resources that you're aware of. So that's one way of taking and analyzing a particular source, such as what I've written here. Let's see, what's the other thing? Okay. The next thing I want to show you is where is it? Okay, here. Tell me something. What does that pronoun it represent?
Your ability. Okay.
No.
Our ability.
It represents your ability?
I think in this case that it refers to the annotated paragraph.
Okay, yes.
Yes, so because we already talked about in the past sentence, making the annotated paragraph statement is repetitive and sometimes tends to be boring. So we find a replacing word.
Okay, good. All right. Yes, this is correct. This is a way of creating proper flow in your papers. However, you have to be very careful about that. For that very reason, you're saying, oh, it's the ability, because you're looking at that and you're looking for a single noun, right? And that's the one that's right here. Well, pretending this is a full paragraph and a full sentence, that the annotated bibliography tests your ability. Okay. It refers to the first subject of the previous sentence. Okay? If this was a plural, it could not refer to annotated bibliography, right? Because it's looking for the first singular. Then you would go to the next noun in that sentence, which is the ability. Here is a problem in writing that everybody's experiencing. It doesn't matter whether you're a really good natural English speaker or your ESL. It could create a lot of problems because when you start using multiple nouns, and maybe you as a writer are intending it's referring to ability, your reader is going to read the subject. And if you use the wrong pronoun, it could refer to something totally different. I guess I should have put up a slide about that, but there was a paper where they were referring to them, and they, and them. And the reader, or the writer, was thinking it was referring to Christians, but the actual subject at the beginning of the paragraph was Muslims. And so it totally changed the way that the paragraph is coming off. So when you're writing pronouns, it, they, you, I, whatever, make sure that you try to replace your subject. And it's very clear that it's related back to the first subject of the pronoun, produce flow. Good flow, you can start off with your subject, use it maybe 2 or 3 times, two times, okay? And then the third sentence, bring it back to the main subject. So you're keeping your reader in line as to what you're doing. So my general rule is, I get my subject up there, I might repeat it again for the second sentence. I could use a pronoun maybe 2 times in 2 different sentences, but then I'll return to it again after the third sentence. And then I'll keep on making sure it's lined up that way. So when you've got your paragraph there, make sure your subjects are lined up and your pronouns are not confusing.
Question.
Yes?
So in this case, we have used a pronoun, say in the second sentence.
Yes, yes.
Yes. So, in that sentence, is it okay if someone went back and used the subject, which is the annotated, instead of using the it again?
Yeah, you could replace the annotated back there, yeah.
How about if someone put another pronoun there instead of it?
Okay, what would you suggest we use? If we say them,
Them?
that would be plural. And so what the reader would do is they'll go back and say, oh, okay, so it's going back to tests. Test is plural, so it must be referring to test, but then this is a verb, so that's confusing for them. So then you can't find, oh, maybe sources. Sources is a noun, so maybe they'll start thinking that, lastly, sources tests. And then, well, probably would change that to correct it, but sources test your research ability. Then the reader's going to be thinking, how can sources test your ability? That creates a logic problem.
You can't use them because them is an object pronoun. You have to say
Oh,
they.
okay, they, okay, they, yes, you're right. They test your research ability, but still it would create a logic problem, and they would be coming, huh?
Because you
How
change
does-
from singular to plural without any. If you want to change from singular to plural, you would have to restate annotated bibliographies as a plural
Right.
and then talk
So-
about that.
So that's a different technique. You don't always have to refer to it as a singular. Maybe you're thinking, oh, multiple bibliographies. I could have said annotated bibliographies test your ability, which is fine. You're thinking in terms of general. We pluralize nouns when we're thinking about ideas in general. When we're first introducing a single one, we would put an article and or a. That's kind of we're thinking more specifically. In this case, it's specific to the syllabus as a single thing that we're going to be doing. Okay. Okay, another way of creating flow here. In this sentence, we introduce an unfamiliar topic. The next sentence, instead of picking up the subject of that sentence, we pick up the final point or the final idea. And we do this by this unfamiliar topic. Okay? So you can use a relative, not a relative pronoun, it's a, what is this? I can't remember what it's called. Anyway, this plus, and then you name the subject you're referring to. When you're using this structure, this something, it could refer to a specific item or element of the sentence, or it could refer to, let's say it's this process. That could refer to the whole sentence as well. It can also refer to, whatever extends above that as well. So if you're explaining a cause and effect, and then we say, oh, this process or this cause and effect could refer to multiple sentences or the whole idea. So it's important to be very specific as to what you're referring to. But that's another way of creating flow. We'll talk about that later. Also notice the use of linking terms. Then, finally. Okay? It's relating ideas back to the previous sentence and showing the relationship between them.
Professor?
Yep.
So the linking word then,
Yep.
when does, if we are to punctuate that sentence,
If we what?
if we are to punctuate that sentence,
Punctuate, okay?
yeah, so when does the comma come after the then?
We wouldn't want to do that for them. We could use it for like however, in contrast, additionally, those linking words, but then we would not do that. Sequentially, finally, has a comma.
Maybe she's asking why does finally have comma but then doesn't have comma? Because isn't it a period of time?
Joining words.
It doesn't occur that way in a particular sentence. Like if you've got one idea Then another idea, we don't put a comma when it's occurring in the middle of a sentence. I don't know exactly why then doesn't do that, but it is just one of the things that doesn't. Maybe it's not an adverb. Because very often, like, additionally, adverb. However, adverb.
What if it says next? Would it have a comma?
Next is, yeah.
Then
Next
you-
is a preposition. Or it's sometimes a preposition, it could be something else. But yeah, we would say first or firstly, comma, secondly, thirdly,
So then it's no comma.
right?
I'm thinking because when you're using then, you now showing the results of what you've written previously.
Okay, yeah.
The previous sentence. And actually, if you were to make it just one sentence, then comes with a comma.
I'm not sure that then, in this case, is showing result. I think it is showing sequence, but we still would not.
As a result of what you've written in the first sentence.
But it wouldn't say as a result.
If we replace then with another joining word, then say for example, if we say, instead of then we say consequently.
Okay.
So,
But is the next step a consequence of the previous?
No.
the next step, I think. Goes
It'd be a step, right? It's in a process,
Oh, yes.
right? Steps in a process, like doing some cooking at home, you know? You break the eggs, then you throw the egg shells out. And finally, you mix them together and fry them up and have breakfast.